Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the latest edition of the Confessions of a Business Owner webinar. These webinars are all about helping business owners understand what drives them and why purpose is important when it comes to building the right business. If you're not dialed into your purpose, you ultimately finish up working too many hours, not earning enough money, falling out of love with your business, and ultimately 95% of small business owners fail. So these webinars are about helping you really understand what drives business owners to do what they do every single day, what puts fire in their belly, and as a result helps them build the right business. And I'm absolutely delighted this afternoon. Can you all hear me? I'm absolutely delighted this afternoon to welcome Deborah Ogden. Deborah, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Gary and everyone.
And we're going to chat this afternoon about the importance of having your own identity. Deborah,
Absolutely.
we were just chatting before we kicked off, weren't we, about everybody's got a story and everybody's got a pivotal moment in their career when they decided to stop doing what they're doing and start doing what they're currently doing right now. And you and I have known each other for what, probably 9 years now plus. But for those that don't know you that well, can you just share? Tony can't hear anything. So hopefully you've got us now, Tony. Deborah, can you just share that? What was that defining moment for you? What was that moment that said, you know what, I need to set up a business that's going to educate business owners and employees about the importance of their personal brand and identity?
So I suppose just going back a little bit for those who don't know me, I trained as a lawyer and found out very quickly that wasn't for me. And even though no regrets, because I do a lot of work with lawyers now and it's been a huge help to me, but my career was always in marketing and communications, and I'd always held roles that were the type of role that everybody knew who I was and what I did. Now, this is going to sound incredibly egotistical, so don't switch off just yet. But so, for example, I was the first media manager at Old Trafford Cricket Ground. So being a female in cricket was a big deal. But being the first media manager in the professional game meant that I was known by a lot of people, and I always had connections with so many people within my role. I went on to CIS, the insurance company, and worked as their events manager. So again, I was connected to lots and lots of people within the organisation. And I didn't realise at the time how much part of my identity was that, not recognition, but I don't mean recognition as in well done, Deborah, but recognition as the relationships that I built with people and that connection. And so fast forward a few years and I became a mum. And I know there's a mix of people, but I'm sure there'll be some parents on this call as well. And I became a mum and much wanted a long journey to have our son Oscar. And I was sat, I can remember the exact moment, sat on a church hall floor singing Dingly Dangly Scarecrow and thinking, what the hell has happened to my life here? There I was, in these high profile roles, and all of a sudden I wasn't even Deborah anymore. I was Oscar's mummy, and I had lost my identity. And it was a real, I ended up with coaching, counseling, the full shebang, and it was all because I'd lost my identity. Now, in that moment, I didn't realize what it was, but I very quickly realized that I'd lost touch with my values. I'd lost touch with what it is that makes me tick. And I realized if I felt like that, then there'd be many other people out there that would have the same experience through whatever big change it was going on in their life. So really, that's where it all started, that recognition that quite often we do identify by our careers, by our job path, but it was that moment of, who am I anymore?
And why is that so important to business owners and to employees that really have got ambitions of getting as high up the ladder as possible?
because you've got to know who you are, and you've got to recognize your identity and have that belief in your identity. We talk about people respecting us, people connecting with us, but you have to project that. You know, I talk about clarity of your personal brand, and that's clarity of your identity. Who are you? Who are you showing up as? Because if you don't know who you show up as, then people don't know who they're buying into. The whole personal brand, I get frustrated because personal brand can very quickly be dismissed as, you know, a beautifully curated Instagram feed. And actually, personal branding is so much more than that. It's about your values. It's about your purpose. It's about what experience will I get if I step into Gary's world. So if I'm going to work with Gary, what am I going to get? And it's not just the what am I going to get in what do you do, but it's the personality as well. It's the experiences. And, you know, we've all heard the cliche, people buy people, but it's about that buying into people's personalities. I don't know about you, but I want to do work with people that I like, that I connect with, that I get on with. And unless you can communicate that identity, that personal brand, who you are, what you stand for, then people haven't got anything to buy into.
So is a big part of it for you attracting the right kind of customers, and also the right, I want to say price point. And let me explain that to you. So I've had a one-to-one with somebody today who I network with, and she said, look, I want to refer you to some of my clients. And so I explained that, you know, I've got a product, for example, at £99. She said, oh, I'd have thought you'd be a lot more expensive than that. And I didn't realize you had a £99 product. So clearly something I've done or said, something I've projected in my personal brand makes her think that, you know, my price point's up here. So is that what we're talking about? Attracting the right customers and the right perception of your value?
I think it's more basic than that. It's attracting your customers, full stop. So it's attracting your audience. So I always say you don't want to be vanilla, you want to be Marmite in some ways. You know, anybody, you can't be everything to everybody. And that means accepting that you're going to upset some people. So there will be some people that will walk away from your personal brand, but it's accepting that that's okay, because those that buy into you will become your customers for life. They will become your advocates, but they need to know what they're buying into. So you want people to buy into you, but you want people to share your message as well. So I always say, and you've heard me say this many, many times, that I look after my cheerleaders, as I call them, my advocates, as much as I look after my clients, because I need to make sure that they've got my purpose and my values and my message, so that they're sharing the same thing as I am, so that they're pointing the right people to me. So yes, the price point thing, absolutely, but it's about attracting the people that want to be part of, you know, when you were at school and you wanted to be part of the certain gang,
Yeah.
it's about people wanting to be in your gang and all recognizing that thread that holds you all together.
And that's an interesting one for me, Deborah, because, you know, when I started out 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now, you know, the idea was I wanted to get in front of as many people as possible. And then when you get an unsubscribe on your CRM system, you're gutted that somebody's unsubscribed. And it took me a while to realize that they're just self-filtering. They're people that are never going to attract me. And I put a post out on social media recently, which was a little bit divisive. And one guy who wasn't my target audience anyway, he said, do you know what? This is exactly the reason why I'm never going to work with you. Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to work with him. So, you know, we've got to get to the point, haven't we, where your personal brand filters out those people that are not right for you.
Yes, but let's face it, most of us are in business to make money and have successful businesses. So that's a really brave place to be. So I can sit here and say, absolutely. And yes, there are some clients that I've walked away from because I've felt it's not been the right fit for me or for them. Because if it's the wrong fit for them, then they're never going, my personal brand's going to take a nosedive in their world. I want them to say, absolutely, you want to work with Deborah Ogden. You don't want that, oh, it's, you know, it just wasn't quite what I was expecting. So you absolutely want that fit. But one of my favorite quotes is from Dieter Von Teese, the burlesque artist, that said, you know, you can be the ripest, juiciest peach in the bowl, but some people will hate peaches. And, you know, it's not about you, it's about them. Let them go. They'll find their tribe. You want the people to buy into you. And we've seen it over in the US. You know, whatever we think of Mr. Trump, he has one of the most powerful personal brands in the world, and people still turned up for him. He has his die-hard fans, and he always will have, because he knows what he stands for. And more importantly, his fans know what he stands for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think his personal brand has probably alienated more people than he would have wanted to. So it's maybe bitten him on the backside somewhat in the last couple of months. But so let's just get right down to basics. What does personal brand mean? Because, you know, some people would say, oh, that's woo-woo words. What does personal brand actually mean?
So Jeff Bezos of Amazon says it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And for me, that absolutely sums it up. So if I was to ask you, and if I look on this call here, so I don't know Chris Cox. So I'm sorry, Chris, I'm picking on you. So I say, Gary, there was somebody called Chris Cox on that call today. What's he like? What's it like working with Chris Cox? And it's what you tell me then. So it's not just what you do, it's how you do it, and it's who you are, which goes back to that purpose thing. You know, how many, you've got Heather that's working in the social media world, how many social media experts are there out there? But then I will be drawn to a certain person, you might be drawn to somebody else. We were talking about VAs, weren't we, earlier? You know, again, there's a wealth of VAs out there, and some people will be drawn to Jem, some people will be drawn to somebody else. So it's about making that connection on a personal level. I watched your conversation with Penny a couple of weeks ago, and she talks about that personal level. Yes, we're doing business, but it's about that connection. And if you connect first, so when you're looking at first impressions, it's about warmth, and then it's about competence. The research shows that we need to trust somebody before we can show our credibility. And the only way we're going to build trust is by connection. And that means showing a bit of ourselves. So that's where your personal brand comes in. It's about knowing who you are, which goes back to your original question about why is that identity important. You've got to know who you are so that you can communicate that, and you can communicate it consistently.
And is that, you know, statistically, you know, you can read loads of reports, but they say 99% of people on social media are lurkers. You know, so if we're connected to, you know, 100 people, 99 are going to be lurking. They never like, they never comment, they never share, but they're just watching in the background. They may want to work with you at some point. They may be thinking about it. They may not even think they need you. So is it about your image? Is it about your messaging? Is it about how you look? Is it about how you act, what you say, that starts to build that initial connection?
All of the above. Yeah, absolutely. It's everything. So let me give you an example. When we went into lockdown back in March, I, like everybody else, had, you know, well, like a lot of people, I had a few days where a lot of my contracts were cancelled because they've been face-to-face business. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I had a conversation with Sally Roberts that I know you've chatted to and is part of this group. And had a chat with Sally, and I said, Sally, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel like selling at the moment. My integrity, I know that people need what I've got at the moment. I know that they need to be visible. I know that they need to be out there and showing up, but I'm not comfortable at the moment selling, just not fitting with my values. And she said, and I was so surprised when she said, with you all the way, Deborah. And I said, but I'm going to share. I'm still going to share. So I decided to do some 2-minute videos every morning. I tell you now, if I'd realized at the beginning what I was setting out to do, I'm not sure I would have committed to it. But 6 weeks later, I was showing up every morning for 2 minutes. I didn't have a clue. Yes, I got some lovely feedback from people saying, my husband and I sit in the morning, we wait for your video to land. And then 6 weeks in, I launched my membership, which was my response to adapting to the pandemic. And I wanted to make it accessible to people. And I was expecting to maybe get 10 people sign up. And I had a lot more than 10 people sign up. And the majority of those people said to me, we listened to your videos in lockdown, Deborah, and we made that connection with you. And you were sharing positivity, you were sharing messages that we needed to hear at a time when we needed it most. And it was a real lesson for me. Number one, it gave me permission because I realized there was a need for it. But it was a real lesson, as you don't know who is out there listening and who you're supporting. And for those people who, visibility is such a massive thing at the moment. And my clients say to me, oh, but I worry about posting content, never mind content that might be a little bit controversial. They don't want to put any content out there. But I always say, if you've ever flicked through LinkedIn or Instagram and just been inspired by something has just caught you and you've thought, you know what, I needed to hear that today. Then if you've done that, you've done your job. For me, if I've made a difference to just one person in a day, then, you know, happy girl.
And isn't that what it's about? It's about getting in front of your audience regularly and resonating with them, isn't it?
It is. And it's, you know, you said at the beginning about purpose. For me, I believe we're out there. We're all out there doing our job. We're all out there showing up. And you know, I'm a football fan, and I'm a Huddersfield Town fan. And it was interesting, on my memories on Facebook yesterday, popped up that I'd shared the stage with David Wagner, the Huddersfield Town coach, when we were in the Premier League. And I talked about stepping up in business, and he talked about stepping up in the Premier League. And the word that he always talks about in football is being extraordinary. And for me, it doesn't take that much to be extraordinary. And he always says this, he doesn't say extraordinary, he says extraordinary. And it's that 1%. And you see it in cycling, particularly Team Sky. Sir Dave Brailsford talked about marginal gains and that 1% more. And for me, I just think if I can inspire somebody to just give that little bit more, it's the stuff that's easy to do, but it's easy not to do. So if you just give that little bit more, that's when the cumulative effect is such a big impact. And that's where you start to be extraordinary. So that's the connection that I'm always looking for.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's a great word, is that? For anybody that's read Seth Godin's Purple Cow, his marketing book, he talks about, you know, is what you're doing extraordinary? You know, and it is, you know, if you look back and go, you know, is your messaging extraordinary? Is the way that you know, deliver to your customers and deliver that wow factor, is that extraordinary? If it's not, then you're vanilla. You're just one in the crowd. And would you say, in the current environment where we can't meet people face to face and people are spending a lot more time either marketing or spending time on social media looking for opportunities, would you say personal brand is more important now than ever before?
Absolutely. So the wonderful thing about social media, the wonderful thing about digital, the wonderful thing about Zoom is we can connect with, and we're on with, did somebody say they were in LA this afternoon? So we can connect with a worldwide audience, but how do you stand out? You know, how do you stand out on a call like this when we're all in our little celebrity squares? And for me, that's where your personal brand is key. And taking it a little bit further, as you know, I talk about personal brand, but I talk about impact as well. And I tend to think actually they're both interchangeable, but it's about being present. So being 100% in the moment. It's about being truly there for for your audience. So have you ever been in that situation where somebody's been talking to you, but they start fiddling with their phone? Or you'll have been on Zoom calls where you can tell that people are doing emails at the same time. Be 100% present for the people that you are with. It's the greatest gift that we can give. We know it when people aren't there. People lose that connection very, very quickly. And that will impact on those people. There's a great story about, and I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but talking about being at a business meeting and sitting next to somebody famous and chatting away to them and not even realizing who they were, because they listened and they absorbed the conversation. And be fascinated rather than fascinating. Listen to people, be present, and they will remember you forever. Another quote, is it Maya Angelou that said, they'll forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And let that be part of your personal brand. So people will never forget how you were 100% there in that moment for them.
Absolutely. So just, I want to break this down into real simple steps, because this is something that I kind of love. It fascinates me, does this. It's that initial connection though, isn't it? It's that initial, what makes you stand out, because they can start to look at, you know, are people fascinated by you? Are you Marmite rather than vanilla? You know, do you resonate? All of those things. But how do you, in an environment where there's 1,000 social media companies, 1,000 marketing companies and so on, how do you make that initial attraction to your target audience?
Well, first of all, you need to know what you stand for. So this goes back to what we started the conversation on. You can't have any confusion there, because the minute there's confusion, then that will start to lead to doubt. So that's where, when I'm working with people, I talk about clarity, communication, and capitalizing. So you have to absolutely have clarity on your message. That's clarity on what you do, but what you bring to it, what your personality is. Who are you talking to? Who are your audience? Who is it? A little bit like you were talking to before. Is it the people that want to pay a premium, or is it the people that want a value, low-end product? So know exactly who it is. And then it's the communication piece, which I know you absolutely love, Gary. This is your area of fascination. And this is where it's how we show up. And it's how we show up in every single way. So we tend to think about when we communicate, we're talking about when we pick up the phone, when we email, but actually, to use your phrase, it's every touch point.
Yeah.
It's every single interaction. So it's when you nip down to the garage for your Sunday paper and you bump into a client. It's that sort of interaction that we sometimes forget about. So it's about communicating, but that's why it's got to be authentic. Because if you, and again, going back to your conversation with Penny, she talked about when you're on the stage, and then the greatest compliment she had was when her kids say, well, you're the same as you are at home, Mum. Absolutely. We soon spot a fake, but if you're faking it, it's going to be absolutely exhausting. Who wants to be showing up not as yourself? So it's about all your senses. So it's the visual. How do you show up? You know, if you are somebody who is charging top end for a product or a service, then you've got to look pretty top end yourself, or people are going to start saying, well, if that's how they show up, I'm not sure I'm going to buy, or I'm not sure I'm going to spend what they're asking for on that service. People get upset about this, but it's what we're hardwired to filter out. This is all about our filters. So it's about visual, it's about auditory, it's what we hear, the language we use, it's about our body language, so the visible side of things, but it's about our behaviors as well. Do we smile? Do we make contact? Do we return calls? Do we turn up on time? You know, the list, we've been through this many times, Gary, the list is absolutely endless. And then on the back of all that, so I say that's the reactive stuff, that's the day-to-day stuff. But you get that sorted, and then you start capitalizing. So that's when you start to really build your profile. And that's for looking for the opportunities, that it's looking for the platforms that suit you. I absolutely love, like you, standing on a stage and sharing my message. I love the energy from the audience. I love the feedback I get. I love the questions, the whole situation. For some people, it's their worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Don't go sticking yourself on a stage if that's not your thing. I've got somebody within my membership who is an absolute craftsman when it comes to the written word. She writes the most beautiful blogs. That's her medium. So it's about finding ways to get your personal brand, your message out there that fits that personal brand as well.
And you're dead right. It fits all the senses, and it's about being you. So if you're not comfortable on stage, either learn to be comfortable on stage or just don't do it, but don't force it. But let me take another example, and this is not a political thing. I don't do politics, but I've got Boris Johnson on the TV yesterday, who's clearly got a Savile Row suit on that looks like it's 5 sizes too big. His tie's never tied correctly. It's loose. And my son said yesterday, why does he never brush his hair? You've got Dominic Cummings that looks like somebody off Home Alone, who's always got like a woolly hat on and scruffy clothes. And on the other side, you've got Rishi Sunak, who's spotless. He's immaculate in his attention to detail, his suit, it fits him, he looks the part. And without any of them opening their mouths, you can make assumptions about people and whether you'd want to vote for them, work with them, work for them, just purely based on how they look.
Well, you said something really interesting there, and I don't know if you're aware. You said you can make assumptions,
Yeah.
but actually you will make assumptions. And this is the thing that is critical in personal branding. So people will say to me, not as much these days. I mean, gosh, 10 years ago when I set up the business, nobody called it personal branding. We talked about reputation, we talked about impact. Now most people know what personal brand is and have recognized the importance of it. But people will say, oh, well, I don't believe in all that stuff, Deborah. It's not apparent to me. But actually, it's those lurkers that you were talking about on social media. Well, we've all got those people in our network that are out there asking questions about us. A great example, there was a guy I worked with, met with about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm not actually sure, Gary, it wasn't you who introduced me to him. So I'm going to be very careful what I say here. But I met this guy and had an hour and a half conversation with him, coffee, and he was desperate to work with me. And he said, love what you do, got it all, gave me all the right feedback. And then he stopped returning my calls. Then he stopped replying to my emails. And then he came back and said, yeah, definitely going to do this, but blah, blah, blah. Having a conversation with 2 or 3 other people, they'd had the same experience. And it got to the stage that whenever this person's name came up, they'd had exactly the same experience. He's a little bit flaky, never comes back to the calls, always says by the way, this guy is a really nice guy, really great guy, but doesn't, show up. Why does he say that? Is it that he's so busy? And all these questions started being associated with this person's name. That is his personal brand. So simple. It's not about swearing in on a Zoom meeting or causing. I'm trying to think of Tiger Wood, the crisis he went to. We tend to think about these big things that go wrong with people's personal brand. But sometimes it's not returning calls. Sometimes it's being a bit flaky and not saying what you'll say you'll do. That can build if people hear it more than once.
Yeah, and it is about that. It is about that authenticity. I hate the word, but be authentic and all that. But
Yeah.
I know, Tony's on the call there, but I know Tony very, very well, and Tony cusses with the best of them. And people will either resonate with that or they won't, and that it kind of filters people. So it's about being true to you, and you will filter your audience out. And a lot of that initial attraction is how you look in the first instance, then it's how you sound, then it's the content you push out, then it's your consistency. And it's that influences what people say about you behind your back, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Consistency, you've said there. It's consistency it's consistency of message. So then it's making sure you communicate that consistently. And so that's across social media. It's how you show up. It's also how, as we said, how your advocates talk about you. So it's your reputation, it's your profile, it's every single interaction with you. It's your, it's your website, it's how you, I don't know if anybody's ever had that situation where they've perhaps been profiled in a magazine and they've sort of stretched your logo a little bit, or they've added their own tint to it. And that to me makes me feel a little bit sick, because I'm so protective of my brand and my logo. So it's about having that. It's about being protective of it, because that is your value. You're the one that has to keep control of it. And something we haven't talked about, Gary, is self-awareness. There's the personal brand going on in your head. So if I was to ask you now, all of you, to tell me what your personal brand is, you will trot something out and tell me what it is. Now, if I was to then ask each of you about somebody else on the call, that personal brand might be very different. So there's the personal brand in your head, but there's actually the personal brand that is out there. So it's about that perception piece. How do people actually receive you? An example, I had a client a few years ago who was an FD, and he was perceived as, he felt he was shy, he was incredibly introverted, and found small talk incredibly difficult. And when I interviewed his team and chatted to his team about it, they all said, oh, he's not interested in us. He comes in the morning, he never asks us about our weekends, he never interacts with us at all. And that small thing created this huge chasm between the personal brand in his head and the personal brand that was out there. So real subtleties in all this.
And I tell a story on stage when I was dealing with a marketing agency a number of years ago, and there was lots of errors in the work that they were doing. And, they kept giving me all of these reasons why it was happening and that they'd put it right. They kept giving me all these promises, and time after time after time, there was errors, there was mistakes, there was spelling mistakes, there was, you mentioned their logo. And there's one particular day, I was going up to their office. It was in a fourth story, and the lift wasn't working. And the lady that was producing the content on behalf of this agency she was just a few steps in front of me. So as I followed her up the stairs, her shoes were absolutely caked in mud. It was the middle of summer, they'd obviously been caked in mud for a while. And, what was obvious to me is that she didn't care about her own personal appearance. Me personally, I would not leave the house without a clean pair of shoes. I just wouldn't do it. But she was walking around in these shoes that had clearly been muddy for months. And in my mind, I'm going, that lack of care and attention is what's translating into her work. Now, that might well have been an incorrect assumption, but that's how my brain works. I look at her going, poor attention to detail. That's why she's making errors.
Absolutely. And there is psychology behind this. So that, all these, you have one chance to make a first impression. And I mean, the fascinating statistic for me, we say that we've only got seconds to make that first impression. But actually, if you get it wrong, so in that example, if that was the first time you'd met her, it would take another 8 interactions to write that wrong, at least 8 interactions to write that wrong first impression. Yeah. And that's because we see something or we experience something, and then we go searching in our hippocampus part of our brain to look for evidence to back it up. Now, our evidence will depend on our own experiences, our own background, our own upbringing as to what is filtered in there. But absolutely, we all like to be right. So we go looking for evidence to back up that first impression. So yes, we should hang around longer, and we shouldn't judge a book by its cover and all those cliches that we hear. But how often in business do we get a second chance? And how often are the things that might not be within our control that are working against us? So the woman that you're talking about in that situation, maybe some of the other issues within the agency weren't down to her, but actually she's just compounded your impression
Yeah.
of them as an organization.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is, we might need another 8 touch points in order to get that relationship back on track. But in an environment where we're time poor and there's so much other choice out there, the reality is that people don't get 8 more chances, because you just move on to somebody else that doesn't have that, considered flaw.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, we all have a bad day and we all make a mistake. And I'm not saying that, we're all perfect all the time. And I'm a huge believer in being real and keeping it real and being open and honest. But it's about being aware, and it's that self-awareness piece. What am I communicating here? How am I showing up? Is it easy to think, oh, well, I'll have an extra 10 minutes in bed? Or is it easy to think, actually, no, I'll get up, I'll do my yoga, I'll go for my run, I'll do my meditation, I'll plan my day, because I know that when I show up, then you'll be getting the best Deborah or the best Gary or the best Bradley or whoever it is. You're getting the best version of that person. And there are some things we can't control in life, but we can control the choices we make, and we can control who we choose to be when we show up. And that goes back to the David Wagner. Why be ordinary? With a little bit more effort, you can be extraordinary.
Yeah. So we've all got this superpower, as you call it, inside us. How do we find out what that superpower is, that we then portray that message at every opportunity? Because that is where the magic happens, isn't it? Where we find that superpower, and we just, every message, every video, every time we show up, how do we find that?
Well, it's knowing what your sweet spot is. So it's a mixture of self-awareness. So and some of the work that people, when I'm working with people one-to-one, there's always a bit of a challenge, because people want to get onto what I call the tactics, the action, the social media feed. They want to be writing a blog, doing videos, getting on the stage. But actually, you need to back it up a bit, and you need to know your values, your purpose, what you're good at. Where have your successes been in the past? Don't be I know Debbie's on here. My weakness is finances. It's not my area of strength. Yes, I've improved on it, but I've made sure I've got the backup there so that I can focus on the stuff that I'm good at. So it's about knowing, but get feedback from people as well. So I always say feedback is absolute gold dust. We're not good at taking it sometimes, but get great feedback. And 95% of what you get will be what you expect, whether that's good or bad. But the bit that you don't expect is where the magic happens, because once you know about that, you can do something about it. If you don't know anything about it, then you're going to carry on rubbing up the wrong people, the same people in the wrong way, or wrong people, I'm trying to say, and upsetting people. So you need to have that awareness. And also, by getting feedback, it might not be negative. Now, one of the challenges I often have with people is getting them to accept how good they are.
Yeah.
If people have worked with in a coaching or a mentoring capacity, I know Phil does this as well, getting people to recognize how good they are, recognize their superpower and own it, and then shout about it. And we can all be very British about this, but one of my favorite quotes is a Marianne Williamson thing, is that our greatest fear isn't that we are, not good enough, but it's that we're powerful beyond measure. And by owning it and standing up and recognizing it, then you're giving other people permission to do that. None of this self-deprecation. I'm not advocating everybody goes out there and starts, shouting from the rooftops about how well, I am actually, but I'm not talking about, being arrogant and upsetting everybody, but I'm saying recognize what you're good at and share it, celebrate it, because, that's how we get visible. That's how people know what we do who we are, where to find us, and what our superpowers are.
And you know what? I think it happens in all walks of life. I was watching a documentary last night, The Last Dance. I don't know if anybody's seen it, or it's all about Michael Jordan. And is when they took the Chicago Bulls from like obscurity to world winners, and they finished up taking on Kobe Bryant. And for anybody that's into basketball, is a bit of a bad boy. But they're interviewing Kobe Bryant, who's this 6'6", really intimidating looking guy. But he's got piercings all over his face. He's got blue nail varnish on. He's got a velvet, kind of soft oversized hat on, a leopard skin coat. And the interviewer's saying, like, why are you dressed like this? It's because it makes me feel happy and I'm comfortable. And she says, well, what about how other people perceive? He says, I don't care. And it was really fascinating that somebody like that could dress completely differently to how you would expect. But he said, it's me, it's my brand, it's how I want to be, and it's how I'm going to be. Love me or like me, love me or hate me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, and from a business point of view, that makes you memorable. But again, going back to the visual impact, often, we've all been told, if you've worked in an office environment and you're going a bit smarter one day, oh, have you got an interview today? And we can be very quick to put people down. But me, for me, we've got to get dressed every day. So it's an opportunity to enjoy fashion and clothing, and it's another opportunity it's part of my personal brand. And if I pitched up for a meeting with you even in COVID times, in my jogging bottoms with no makeup on, I think you would probably have me carted off to, because it's not who I am. And I'm not saying that everybody should be like that, but that is who I am. And I can remember, back at school, I was never the cleverest. I was never the funniest. I was never the prettiest. I was always the last one that was picked when it came to rounders. And I learned very quickly that you have to find ways to stand out. And again, at Old Trafford Cricket Ground, being a female in cricket around all those big egos, you've got to find ways for people to remember you. It was my job to make sure that Old Trafford and Lancashire Cricket Club were in the forefront of the minds of the national and international media. So I had to find ways of making myself memorable. Yeah. And for me, that's where that extraordinary vibe comes from. It's that, okay, how can I go the extra mile so that people will remember who I am? And then it's about being that front of mind person when somebody wants what it is that you offer, whatever it is, so that people know. I talk about being a visible expert. You want to be known as the expert in your field, and people need to know what they're going to get and where they're going to find you.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating for me, just a quick story, if you like, or a quick anecdote. I know there's one or two people on this webinar this afternoon that have been to our boot camps. What we tend to do at boot camp when we're talking about personal brand is I'll get somebody out of the audience that's not known to anybody, and I'll stand them at the front and I'll say, hey, everybody, can you all write down what Pete does for a living? What does Pete drink? Where does he shop for clothes? What's his favorite meal? What's his favorite restaurant? What car does he drive? And people will make assumptions about Pete's lifestyle, his car, his food, is he single, married, whatever, based on his personal appearance. And sometimes they will completely wide of the mark. And I think the bit of missing magic in all of this for me, and I think it's been a great deal of content this afternoon, a lot of insight, is people make assumptions about you without talking to you, without talking to anybody else about you. They make assumptions. And they used to say that you've got 8 seconds to make a first impression. Well, I think in mobile phone world, you've got an eighth of a second, and they can swipe past you pretty quickly. So if you don't resonate in that eighth of a second, you're going to be swept past, and they're going to look at somebody else. And I think that's why this is such an important topic for me.
And Gary, you say there that people will make assumptions, but I often say, when I'm presenting on stage, take control of your personal brand, because if you don't, someone else will take control of it for you. Yeah. And that, for me is the crucial bit. It's that assumption piece. So you have to override those assumptions. And it might mean that I'm very visual and I talk about a dial. Sometimes you have to dial it up. So if you're on a stage, you have to dial up your gestures to make sure that you've got open body language. And it's about dialing it up so that people have no, if you were a product and people were, and somebody was looking at your packaging and your marketing, then they would look for the right colors that match the message that you're looking for.
Yeah.
They'd look at the right font. And it's exactly the same as an individual. It's making sure that that message is being communicated every single time, because
Consistent,
on the time you don't do it, it's sod's law that, you know, your big pitch, your life changing customer has just experienced you. So it's making sure you're in control so that you are overriding those assumptions that could be otherwise.
Absolutely. Deborah, that's been amazing. Absolutely fantastic. And I knew that we could have talked for hours, and I feel like we could. But we're going to have to kind of just leave it there and open up to questions. So I know there's a question from Phil, which I'll get to in a moment. But if anybody else has got any questions that they want to ask Deborah about anything related at all to this topic, just put them in the chat box and I'll pick those up. So Phil's got a great question here. Shouting about ourselves and our superpower is often counterintuitive to what we're taught as kids and by our parents. Stop showing off. But how do we counter that? Because now what you're saying is show off a little bit. So how do we counter that? You know, what's been drummed into us for 20, 30, 40 years.
So if you've got a superpower is something that is of benefit to your audience. And you've got to remember that there is somebody out there that needs what you are offering. And it's about flipping that and thinking about it as serving that person rather than showing off about what it is that you're shouting from the rooftops about. And interestingly enough, that's exactly how a little bit I was feeling at the beginning of lockdown, when I was talking about, I don't want to be out there profiting from this, but I've got a message that I really need to share with these people. And by doing it in the way I did, it allowed me to serve, if you like, my audience without feeling that I was showing off and being over the top. But I do think there is a little bit of showing off. I think we've got to be able to toot our own horn, as they say, and be able to recognize our achievements, recognize our superpower. I would always say I would step back and look at, if you're writing a piece of content, step back and look at the reasoning behind it. Why am I sharing this? And if you honestly feel it's coming from the right place, then share it. There's a difference when we read, everybody will recognize this. There is a difference when you read content that's on Instagram or on LinkedIn that you think, you know what, I'm sick of hearing about you. Very good, off you trot. Whereas there are other people that you think, that's brilliant. I'm really glad you shared that today. I am so proud of you. And you can see the difference in the responses. So it's about thinking about the words that you use, how you communicate, how you connect with those people. But I truly believe if you are talking to the right audience and you are coming from the right place, then sharing your superpower will land in the way that it should.
Fantastic.
Does that help, Phil?
Fab.
Yeah.
Keep your questions coming, people. I've got another question here from Bradley, which is a great one. Where would be the best place to start that typically gives the greatest impact?
Okay, I'll tell you what I've got that I can share with you, Gary, if you want to share with the group, and that's a wheel of impact. And that is like, if anybody's ever done any coaching, it's a wheel that has 8 segments in it, and it's an overview of all the different areas for your impact. And I would say the place to start is the place where you're weakest. So there might be an area, because we've talked about all the positive things that can promote your personal brand. but there might be some areas that are undermining your personal brand. And that for me is the area where you want to be starting. So on reflection, I would say get some feedback, find out do you know what your personal brand is? So many people don't. So find 5 people. I wouldn't say do it with less than 5 people, because all feedback is subjective. So we're looking for themes here. But ask people some questions. Now, don't say, have I got a great personal brand? Because you're going to get either a yes or a no and not much information. But I would say to them, what am I really great at? What should I continue doing? What should I stop doing? And what should I start doing to improve my impact and my personal brand? And look at a selection of people that will give you and explain why you're doing it. Be honest, be open. It might inspire them to do the same, and get that feedback. And once you've got that feedback, then you can start to look at it and think, right, okay, I need to smarten my appearance. Okay, I need to be more visible on LinkedIn. Okay, I can be a bit direct. I need to soften my approach. Okay, I come across as too silly. You know, I'm always life and soul of the party, and I need to come across as more serious, whatever it is. Does that help?
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it does. Hopefully, Bradley. Danny's got a great one. Danny's a photographer. What's the biggest tip you would give for branding?
Can you just expand on that a bit, Danny? Not quite sure in what context.
Okay, we'll come back to that, Danny. If you can just add to that, if you would. So another one from Phil. You mentioned being self-aware. How do we do this?
Okay, so this is a bit of a tricky one for 2 minutes on here, Phil. I think you're challenging me this afternoon, but self-awareness, some people have got it, some people haven't. So the feedback will help with that, but just by tuning in. So be aware of where you want to be aware of your goals, be aware of your outcomes, be aware of your purpose. And look at the feedback and look at the results that you're getting. And if they're falling short, then there's probably a gap somewhere, and that's going to help you with your self-awareness. But also there's a tool called a Johari window, which is JOHARI, which is a self-awareness tool. And if you go, I'm not going to talk through it now, it'll take too long. I work through it with my clients, and it's talking about the hidden parts of you, the parts that people are aware of. Then there's the parts of you that other people are aware of that you're not aware of. And then there's the area that nobody's aware of until you unlock your potential. Loads of information on the Johari window on Google, PDFs on it, everything. Give it a look.
Fantastic. So Danny's just added to this. So the original question, what was the biggest tip you would give for branding? What we most do that's most important for branding. So what should we do that's most important from a personal brand perspective?
Honestly, I would say have clarity on how you want to come across. So write down some words, know the words that you want to. So if it's connectable, that's not a word, is it? A good at making connections. Yeah. I'm struggling now. Approachable, that's a better word. Approachable. I'm thinking of words that you'd want to be as a photographer. Approachable, creative, putting people at ease. So those are all words that you're going to be writing down, I would imagine. Then you've got to make sure that when you show up as those words. So make sure that you smile. I mean, I know Danny enough to know that absolutely he's going to greet everybody with a smile. But if you're saying I'm approachable, but actually you're as miserable as sin every time everybody meets you, then they're going to start questioning your personal brand. Another great example of that is radiators and drains. You know, we've all know somebody who's a radiator, that you spend time with them and you come away and your cheeks ache because you've been laughing, and they really fill your cup and you feel great. And then I want everybody just to think of a drain at the moment, somebody who they've always got it worse than everybody else. They've always had the worst journey, the worst workload. Yeah. Has everybody got a drain in mind? But if you just think about that person, that's part of their personal brand.
Yeah.
How would they feel if they knew that? So how you show up is absolutely critical. So if there's one thing I would say, just be aware of how you want to show up and make sure you show up like that every single time.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Fantastic. I'm conscious we're hitting 3 o'clock and there's 1 or 2 people already tight for time. If there's no more questions, I'd just like to say thank you everybody for joining. Deborah, thank you for so much fantastic insight. How can people best connect with you?
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn or deborahogden.com.
So if I give everybody your website address and I give everybody your LinkedIn details tomorrow on the email, then they can connect with you directly. So Deborah, I just want to say thanks again for so much fantastic insight. You know, you and I could chat forever and a day about this because we love it. This webinar for everybody, just as a reminder, is all about helping people dial into purpose. I hope everybody can see and hear Deborah's energy coming through because she lives and breathes this. She's passionate about this. She can talk all day about it. And I think that's where you need to be in your business. You need to be building a business where you've got that same level of energy in everything that you do and everything that you say every single day, because if not, there's a chance you're building the wrong business. So we've got no more webinars planned at the moment. There will be details of today's webinar going out for anybody that wants to catch it on replay or anybody that wants to catch up on anything that missed. That just leaves me to say thank you again, Deborah. Thank you everybody for joining and take care for now.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.